the session. Good evening, friends. Amongst us are two eminent persons in the taxation side. One is Mr. Rakesh Gupta. He's a former income tax appellate tribunal member. He's an author. He's a gold medalist. He appears frequently in the income tax appellate tribunal, High Court, Supreme Court. He represents various organizations. See, he was a chartered accountant by profession. Somehow he got more fascinated towards the profession of law, for which majority of the persons in this participants are. And Mr. Singla, with his expertise, he is a chartered accountant by profession, and his Consul and Singla in the northern region is a brand known within itself. Anybody who is in a trouble, as they say, tax is very taxing. But once you have chartered accountants and advisors like Mr. Rakesh Gupta and T.N. Singla, I feel that it is the simplest way. Well, filing of the returns itself is very tedious. And in case you receive the notice, just as you informed before the session, that you received a seizure notice, etc., then you thought of writing a book. Any ordinary person receiving a notice under the income tax, it is just like what we say in Hindi, darwaje ke bahar Yamraj khada hai. And if we meet people like Mr. Gupta and T.N. Singla, they act like Sati Savitri and they help the persons to be saved. Over to both of you. Mr. Gupta will first explain us, and then investment master Mr. C.N. Singla will explain. The questions, if any, can be posted in the chat box. We will take it at around 5:56. The questions should be posted after 5:40, because otherwise we will get confused. There are so many questions pouring in. And our session will complete at 6:30. 6:30, we play KBC, as we frequently say, fastest finger first. So whosoever first questions will come, we will answer that. Unless some questions are left, we will bid goodbye, and we will see if both of them again come on this platform. We can start again the chapter. The sequel of this session could be on. Over to you, Mr. Gupta. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, my friends. I have been told that the audience today is very seasoned and illustrious law professionals who are either self-employed or are partners in law firm or are working with some law firms. And the topic which has been given to me and which I have tailored it from that perspective only, the income tax planning from the standpoint of the self-employed lawyers. Whenever, as Vikasji has spoken about the tax, that the tax is quite taxing. There is a proverb that the tax and death are the two certainties in life. And despite the tax and death being certainty, we always want to avoid both of them. Payment of tax, in any case, is not considered a very pleasant task. And given the opportunity, we try to ensure that its impact is minimized. Tax planning, in fact, consists of all those actions on the part of the taxpayers that, while remaining within the four corners of law, take advantages of the concessions, grants, rebates, reliefs, deductions, exemptions conferred by the law. Tax planning is permissible in law because the law says that every individual is entitled to arrange his affairs in a way so as to enable him to reduce the incidence of tax. Definitely, tax planning is different from the tax avoidance and tax evasion. Tax avoidance is, though within the four corners of law, but keeps the form over the substance on the higher pedestal. Whereas evasion is just illegal and unethical and is considered as an offense. It is often said that the tax is price we pay for the civilization. And any attempt on our part not to pay tax or to evade tax is akin and identical to an attempt whereby we are trying to eat the share of our future generations, of our progeny. Therefore, tax evasion and tax avoidance. Tax evasion, at least, I mean, is being an offense, and therefore, I mean, should not be resorted to. It has got its own adverse consequences. Therefore, the planning includes to take maximum advantages so as to reduce the incidence of tax, and at the same time, since tax planning is part of the larger tax management, I have to ensure that I should avoid the pitfalls, because if I fall into the pitfalls, then there are adverse consequences for such kind of lapses which I make, and which in turn increase my tax obligations, tax liabilities, and the penal consequences. Therefore, having regard to my audience today, now I will speak about some of the planning measures under the Income Tax Act, because I deal in the direct taxes only. Those who are self-employed, Income Tax Act offers an occasion for us to pay tax on the presumptive income. But there are certain conditions to it, and that condition is that if the gross receipts from the profession is not more than 50 lakhs of rupees, then you can pay tax on the 50% of such income, a 50% of such receipts, by treating it as income. So if I am a lawyer practicing, I do not want to maintain books of account, my gross receipts do not exceed 50 lakhs of rupees, then Income Tax Act enables me and asks the Income Tax Department to presume my income, at my option of course, to compute my taxable income at 50% of minimum 50%. If you want to offer more, if you earn more than 50%, then of course you have to offer more than that 50%. But even if you earn 50%, then they say, then 50% will be deemed to be your income from the profession. And given the existing rates, now the tax liability on 25 lakhs in case a self-employed person who is engaged in the profession is earning not more than 50 lakhs of gross receipts, now will end up in paying approximately 5 lakhs of rupees, which constitutes, with reference to the gross receipts, roughly 10% of the gross receipts, and if we take 50% as income, then 20% of the net income. But couple of things which needs to be borne in mind is that this position of law estimates my income at 50%. Therefore, there should not be any attempt on our part, either overtly or covertly, to have the investment more than 25 lakhs rupees. Because if I say that my gross receipts are 50 lakhs of rupees, but my bank account consists the balance of 40 lakhs or 35 lakhs rupees out of this 50 lakhs, and then I say that my income be taken at 50%, no. Because in that situation, that accrual over than 25 lakhs of rupees now cannot be permitted, or it can be permitted subject that you have to pay tax on it. So the law says that 50% or such higher amount which you want to declare in your return of income will be deemed to be a taxable income. And in such a situation, you need not to maintain the books of account. But then if you want to claim that your income is less than 50%, then the law says that you have to maintain books of account, you have to get them audited also. But then if you are practicing as a partner of a legal firm, then legal firm, that is the firm, would also be required to pay tax, but then that firm is entitled to claim deductions on account of remuneration paid to the partners. There are certain limits subject to which the remunerations can be paid to the working partners, and the methodology of working that remuneration will have to be provided in the partnership deed. Apart from the remuneration, interest not more than 12% per annum on the capital of the partner is also allowable to the firm. And after deducting this remuneration, after deducting this interest, whatever is the receipts, and of course the other expenditures, earned by the firm, incurred by the firm, the net taxable income from the profession of that firm is computed. But I am coming on this, that the recipient partner who is receiving the remuneration and interest, the character of such remuneration and interest in the hands of the partner of a legal firm would be income from profession only. So if the gross amount of this remuneration and interest is less than 50 lakhs of rupees, then that presumptive scheme for offering the income to taxation, which I just discussed a little while ago, can be availed in connection with the remuneration. So if you being a partner, working partner of a firm of lawyers, now happen to receive remuneration and interest from the firm in a year, which is less than 50 lakhs of rupees, then such amount will constitute professional income in your hands. It will be taxable as your professional income, and then you can go in for the presumptive scheme of taxation, and you can offer 50% minimum, 50% of such receipts to tax. And I mean, thereafter the tax will be calculated. 50% will be deemed, 50% of that receipts will be deemed to be your taxable income, on which the tax liability will be worked out. Yes. In case you being working partner receiving remuneration and interest do not want to offer your income on presumptive basis, then of course you can maintain books of accounts. You can claim the expenses while you are acting as the working partner in the firm. Then also the expenses in connection with earning the professional income, you can claim, like salary which you are paying in your individual capacity to your staff, vehicle expenses, vehicle depreciation which you are using the vehicle for the purpose of pursuing the profession in the capacity of the partner of the firm, and other expenses which can be claimed as having been incurred wholly and exclusively for the performance of professional duties. Even that can be claimed against such a professional income received by you in the form of remuneration and interest from the partnership firm, because the character of such remuneration and interest is professional income. But then if your receipts are more than rupees 50 lakhs, then of course you cannot go in for the presumptive scheme. You are required to maintain books of accounts, and not only are you required to maintain books of accounts, but then you have to get them audited also from T.N. Singla sir. All expenses which can be said to have been incurred wholly and exclusively for the purpose of you pursuing the profession, now that is allowable as deductible expenditure against your gross professional receipts, be it rent, taxes, repairs, insurance of the office building. Similarly, rent, repairs and insurance of your vehicle or any equipments which you use in your office, depreciation on computers and software, it is allowable at somewhat a reasonably higher rate. And then if you use such assets for more than 182 days in the year, then you are entitled to that rate of depreciation. Otherwise, you are entitled to the depreciations equal to 50% of the normal depreciation rate which is available to you. Suppose if you have borrowed funds on interest, and those borrowed funds have been used during the course of you carrying on the profession. Interest, suppose you have bought a vehicle, the interest which you pay, or you have furnished your office, you have borrowed for the purpose of buying the office, then that borrowed funds and the interest paid on such borrowed funds which have been used for the purpose of profession can be claimed against your professional receipts as a deduction. But one thing which has to be borne in mind, that if you pay your income tax liabilities out of your overdraft account, then interest paid on that overdraft which is referable to the payment of tax, now that cannot be allowed to as a deduction. So the payment of tax should not be made from the overdraft account, though there are arguments available that it can still be claimed as a deduction, but then it will unnecessarily lead into the litigations which should be avoided. At least we can say it for ourselves, though I mean, since we are into the professions, litigation is there, then we are there, but then at least we ourselves being into this profession should avoid the litigations being foisted on us. So if vehicle running expenses, repairs, driver salary, staff salary, bonus, wages to workers, munshi, gardeners, if I mean if even if it's a rented office, uh, then there is a gardener for the purpose of proper upkeep of that office. All expenditures, stationery, printing, conveyance, staff welfare, entertainment, employees wedding gifts, and other such expenses. I mean, I cannot list all the expenses, but then what I wish to emphasize that all expenses which can be said to have been incurred wholly and exclusively for the purpose of carrying on the profession, now that is allowable expenditure. Now at the same time, there are certain disabilities and disincentives in the form of the disallowances which we should avoid. Now there is a provision that if we are incurring some expenditure during the course of our carrying on the profession, and if there is an expenditure exceeding this 20,000 which has been incurred, and if it has been incurred, the payment of which has been made otherwise than by account pay check or bank draft or through the electronic clearing system, then despite such expenditure having been incurred wholly and exclusively for the purpose of the profession, now it would not be allowed. Therefore, we must ensure that such payment exceeding rupees 20,000 for which I am claiming deduction, I intend to claim deductions against my professional receipt, that should not be paid otherwise than through the account pay check, bank draft. Similarly, if there are certain payments in respect of the expenditure which I intend to claim against my professional income, on which I am required to pay or I am required to deduct tax at source, like in case of the referral practice. Now, when the other lawyers refer the matter, then we have to pay the professional fee in certain situations. So under section, there is under section 194J, that if the aggregate amount paid in connection with the rendition of the professional services is more than 30,000 rupees, then if my accounts are audited, I am taking that at least, I mean, our accounts may be audited or we are having the receipts of more than 50 lakhs of rupees, and in that situation, even if I am practicing as an individual, then I am required to deduct tax at the rate of 10% from such professional payments, and then I am required to deposit it to the government treasury, and there is a prescribed time limit. And in case if I have failed to deduct, or having deducted if I have not paid it, and there is a time limit, and the time limit is the due date of filing of return, then such expenses equal to the 30% of such expense. Earlier the entire expense used to be disallowed, but now 30% of such expense, now that is liable to be disallowed. That means that it will not be allowed as a deductible expenditure against my professional receipts. So that we have to take care of. Similarly, if I am paying salary to some of my staff, and if I compute their taxable salary, and I am required to deduct tax at source, though there is a basic exemption of 2,50,000 rupees in case of an individual. So if there is an employee to whom I am paying salary, and his salary which I pay exceeds the basic exemption limit, then I as an employer am required to deduct tax at source. And in case I fail to deduct, or having deducted I do not pay it to the government on or before the prescribed date, then 30% of such salary is liable to be disallowed. And similar is the provision in respect of the rent in connection with my office premises. So if there is rent which I am paying, and there is a threshold limit, there is 2,40,000 rupees in a year, and provided my accounts are subject to audit in the preceding year, then I am required to deduct tax at source. Then I am required to pay it to the government, and in case I am not able to deduct, or having deducted I have not made it over to the government, then the 30% of the rent so paid now is liable to be disallowed. Similarly, contractors, if I have engaged during the course of I carrying on the profession, then I am required to deduct tax at the rate of 2% in case the aggregate amount paid to the contractor exceeds rupees 1 lakh, or at one point of time it is more than 30,000 rupees, then I am required to deduct and then paid it to the government on or before the prescribed date. And in case I have failed, in the discharge of by this obligation, then 30% of such payment, which otherwise is an expense wholly incurred, exclusively incurred for the purpose of carrying on the profession, which but for such non-compliance would have been allowed as a deduction to me against my professional receipts, now would not be allowed to me. That has to be. Then if I am making payment to the related person on account of salary or on account of any expenditure while carrying on the profession, and that related party falls within a particular definition of the relations, then in that situation, the reasonableness of the payment to that relative now may be scrutinized by the income tax department to see whether such expenditure which I am paying and seeking to claim deduction, lest it should be unreasonable or excessive, having regard to the fair market value of those goods and services. So this aspect has also to be seen. Suppose if we are paying any salary or for that matter any expenditure which we are trying to claim against our professional receipts and expenses incurred in connection with my profession, then it should not be more than the fair market value of that goods or services. Otherwise, the reasonableness. Otherwise, if I incur some expenditure which has not been incurred in relation to or which has not been paid to the related party, then the reasonableness of that expenditure cannot be gone into by the tax department. But then if the payment has been made to the related party, then of course it will be within the jurisdiction of the tax department to see whether such payment is not excessive or unreasonable, having regard to the legitimate professional needs, even of course. But then this decision has to be taken based on some evidence by the income tax officer. It cannot be just in the air, it cannot be in vacuum, but that kind of power is there. Now we as the individuals maybe practicing law, now we have got houses. Now I can occupy, under the income tax law, I can occupy 2 houses as a self-occupied house because there is no notional rental income, rather its annual value is treated as nil. And but then if there is a third house, and the third house, even if it is not fetching rent, then the law says that the fair rent which this property is expected to fetch from year to year, that notional rent now would be taxed. So earlier there used to be the provision that one can retain only 1 house. Last couple of years this limit of 1 house has been increased to 2 houses. So if as an individual, if I am having 2 houses, I can claim that I am occupying both the houses for my own purpose, and then I have not to pay any tax on its notional rental income. But if there is a third house, therefore we have to see that if there are other members in the family and then we want to go in for, and house may be big or small, there is no such distinction that house should be of this much of dimensions, only then it can be said to be the house. So if we have got more members in the family who are not having house in their name, then we can plan to have house in their name so that the benefit of self-occupied house can be availed by the other individual in our house also. Now, interest on the borrowed fund, and those borrowed funds which have been used for the purpose of acquisition or construction or repair or renovation of that house, now that is allowable. But the maximum amount which can be claimed as a deductions against your taxable income in case of a self-occupied house is 2 lakhs of rupees. So this has to be seen. Now, in case of assets, now if I own asset which in course of time I want to sell it, then there is a concept of capital gains, that if I am selling a property at say some considerations that is X, then as reduced by the cost of acquisitions, if there is a capital gain, then I am required to pay tax depending upon the period of or the length of the period for which I have held this property. That is called long-term capital gain or the short-term capital gain. Short-term capital gain in respect of all assets except the capital gain arising from the listed equity shares, it has to suffer the tax rate of 30%. in case of long-term capital gain, other than the long-term capital gain arising on the transfer of the listed equity shares, the tax rate is 20%. But then the rural agricultural land means that agricultural land on which agricultural operations result, but which has been situated beyond the prescribed distance from the local municipal limits. That is called a rural agricultural land. So a rural agricultural land has been sold by me, then any amount over and above its cost of acquisition now will not be taxable, because rural agricultural land, though this term has not been used under the Act, but for the sake of expediency I am using to indicate and denote those agricultural land which have been situated beyond the prescribed distance. So the objective of this discussion is that if there is a rural agricultural land, the transfer of this rural agricultural land cannot be said to be the transfer of capital asset, and the capital gain, taxable capital gain, results only on the transfer of the capital asset, and therefore transfer of rural agricultural land would not give rise to any taxable capital gain. But then even if there is urban agricultural land where the agricultural operations were being carried, and if such and situated within the municipal limits or particular distance of the municipal limits, now but for acquisition by the government, by whether the state government or the central government, the capital gain arising on the transfer of urban agricultural land would have been taxable. But in case of the urban agricultural land which has been transferred as a result of the acquisitions proceeding, then subject to certain conditions, even if there is excess of the compensations over the cost of acquisitions, that will not make that surplus as taxable. And nowadays, since the acquisitions not only of the agricultural land but whole lots of other properties are being undertaken under this right to fair compensation and transparency in land acquisitions or rehabilitation resettlement act, then if there is any capital gain arising on the transfer or acquisitions of the property may be of any types of the capital assets under this act, then this act says, and surprisingly it is very interesting to see that there is no provision under the Income Tax Act which says that if there is a compensation received under this act, it will be tax free. But then the overriding effect which has been given under this act, even to the extent of overriding effect over the Income Tax Act, any compensation received under this act would not give rise to any taxable capital gain. Then if there is a transfer of the assets by way of partition of the family or by way of the family settlement, because that will not be called as the transfer, or if the properties are given by way of gift, then also it will not be treated as transfer, and then since it is not treated as transfer, then it will not give rise to any capital gain. How the capital gain is to be calculated, as I said, sale consideration. But then what is sale consideration? To be reduced by the cost of acquisition. In case the property has been held for more than in case of land and building 2 years, in case of other assets of more than 3 years, then it will be treated as long-term capital gain, and then we have to index that cost of acquisition. And that capital gain then will suffer the tax rate, and that is the concessional tax rate which has been given. But then if you are transferring the land or building, it's very important, then the law requires that the actual sale consideration should not be less than the stamp duty value. And in case the actual sale consideration is less than the stamp duty value, the circle rate, then instead of taking the actual sale value as the sale consideration, then the stamp duty value, the law says, will be deemed to be the actual sale consideration, or that will be deemed to be the consideration flowing as a result of the transfer, and the capital gain will have to be computed, unless you raise an objection before the tax department that its fair market value is really less than the stamp duty value. And in that situation, then the tax department can appoint the official valuer of the tax department. Many times, the assets which are sold may have been acquired before 1st of April 2001. Now, in that situation, the law has given this option that what was the fair market value of that property as on 1st April 2001. You can take that fair market value as the cost of acquisition. So suppose a property, suppose a land was acquired, say in 1970, at say for a lakh of rupees, and now it has come to be sold, say for 4 crores of rupees. Now, but for this provision which I am going to discuss, then 4 crore sale consideration is reduced by the indexed cost of 1 lakh of rupees. But an option has been given in respect of those assets which have been acquired prior to 1st April 2001, that at the option of the SSE, the fair market value of that property which was prevailing as on 1st April 2001, which in most of the cases will be far more than the actual cost of acquisition, so it is sought to be given as a concession. So take the fair market value of that property as on 1st April 2001, and then from there you index, and then you reduce that amount from sale consideration, like in this example from 4 crores of rupees, then whatever capital gain would come, that will be treated as long-term capital gain. So this aspect has to be borne in mind. Now, if there are capital gains, then there are several avenues for avoiding the levy of tax on such capital gain by remaining within the four corners of law, and the law has envisaged certain investments in case you want to, but not all types of assets on its transfer this kind of concession is available. So if you have transferred some residential house and there is a capital gain, and that capital gain is invested in some other house, even if you may be having several houses, but then if this capital gain is invested in one house, and since last year one concession has been given, if the capital gain is not more than 2 crores of rupees, then instead of investing in only one house, you can go in for buying or constructing two houses, even that. So section 54, this is called the deduction, the exemption under section 54, which says that if there is a capital gain arising on the transfer of a long-term capital asset being residential house, and such capital gain is invested in the purchase, acquisition or construction of another residential house, and there is a time limit for it, then you can claim the amount of that investment which you make in the purchase, acquisition or construction of that house from your capital gain amount, and then if the entire capital gain is invested, then there will not be taxable liability. If you are selling any agricultural land, urban agricultural land, on which there is a capital gain, and that capital gain may be short-term capital gain or long-term capital gain, and if you acquire another agricultural land within a particular time frame, then also there is the provision that to the extent of the investment made by you, now there will not be capital gains tax liability, but it is applicable in case of an individual. Now in case of you are transferring, suppose, any asset other than the residential house, and there is a capital gain, then subject to certain conditions you can go in for the purchase, acquisition or construction of the residential house. There are some conditions that you should not own more than one house, or it has been made two houses on the date of transfer of that capital asset. I mean, there are certain conditions, but then that is called the exemption under section 51, because the objective is to make a preliminary provisions. Like there is one more provision that in case there is a capital gain arising on the transfer of a long-term asset, long-term which has been held for a particular specified number of months, then you can invest in the specified bond, NHAI bond, rural electrification bond, but subject to maximum of 50 lakhs, and to that extent then you will not be required to pay capital gains tax. Now gifts received from the relatives, now they have come to be defined: brother, sister, lineal ascendant, descendant, brother, sisters. So if you receive any gift from any person other than these relatives, now that will constitute your income. If in aggregate, the gifts received from all the persons are in excess of 50,000 rupees. But then if the gifts have been received from the relatives provided the gifts are genuine, the source of those gifts are genuine, then such gifts now would be exempt. Or the gifts received on the occasion of marriage, now they are also exempt. You are not required to pay tax. What suppose if you are buying some property, even from a stranger, at less than its stamp duty value, and the difference is more than 50,000 rupees, then the entire difference would constitute income, unless of course you claim it before the tax department that this fair market value is less than the stamp duty value. In that situation, the district valuation officer will be appointed. In case he determines the fair market value at less than this, then you will get the reprieve and relief. Now, one very important thing which has to be borne in mind, there is one provision under the Income Tax Act which is, I would use, very draconian in the sense in terms of the tax rate. And if there are incomes which are assessed in your hands on deeming basis, because you could not prove the source of those amounts. Suppose if you have raised some loan, but then you could not prove the source. If you have made some investment, but then you could not prove the source of that investment. If you have incurred some expenditure, but then you could not prove the source of that expenditure, then the law says that such kind of income will be treated as income from undisclosed source, because after all, you have made investment, you have incurred expenditure out of some income, the source of which is not explained. Therefore, such unexplained income from 2 years back onwards, the tax rate has been hiked to 70, effective tax rate has been hiked to 78%. 60% tax, 15% surcharge, and 3% of the 3%, that is 4% of such tax, that comes to 3% as the effective, 78%. So we must ensure that we are, or we do not do anything that we end up in paying this much of atrocious confiscatory nature of the tax under section 100, and I mean that is called section 115 BBE rate. Then one thing which I have found that we happen to commit errors is that under the Income Tax Act, if I earn some income, say I earn income from the bank, from the fixed deposit, and if I have borrowed fund on interest and then I've used that fund for making that FD, then this interest which I have paid has got direct correlation with the earning of income from the FDR. And therefore, if I'm earning say 10 lakhs of rupees as interest from FDR, if I have invested the interest bearing borrowed funds in making that FDR and I am paying interest say for 8 lakhs of rupees, then only 2 lakhs of interest will be taxable in my hands. But then if I do that, I make investment in FDR from my own funds and then I borrow on the strength of that FDR and then pay interest to the bank. Like in this example, I earned 10 lakhs of rupees in the FDR and the investment in FDR was made from my own source. I raised loan from that FDR and I spent it for some other purpose, not for the purpose of earning income. And I pay 8 lakhs of rupees to bank against that demand loan. So this 8 lakhs will not be allowed as a deduction to you against the 10 lakhs of rupees. What is essential is that first of all, there has to be interest bearing borrowed fund, and that interest bearing borrowed fund should be deployed in some asset from which the income is coming. Only then the deduction is permissible, and there has to be one-to-one nexus, so that we can say that this interest expenditure on the borrowed fund has been incurred by me solely for the purpose of earning the interest income from the FDR. So this has to be borne in mind. Then we have got clubbing provision. Clubbing provision means that if there are income which is resulting to the spouse from any concern in which I have got more than 20% stake, 20% profit sharing ratio, and unless this income which is resulting to my spouse is not solely attributable to the professional skill or experience, then such income will be deemed to be my income. So these are the anti-tax avoidance measures. As people used to split their income by showing some expenditure having or some income being earned by the spouse, therefore these anti-tax avoidance measures were brought in wholesale in 1969. So clubbing provision. So if I have transferred some asset to the son's wife, then the law says the income from the asset gifted or transferred to the son's wife, that will still be taxable in the hands of the transferor. So if I have got house, that house is on rent, I have transferred it into my into the name of my son's wife, the income of rent which is accruing to her, which is being received by her, nonetheless that will constitute my income, and that will be taxable in my hand. There is a particular methodology of computing that income, but what I am speaking on the principle. Now there is, I am just quickly, now there are couple of provisions which have to be borne in mind, and the non-observance of those provisions can lead in very dire pecuniary consequences. Now there is a provision under the Income Tax Act which says and which prohibits that no person shall accept any loan or deposit or money in connection with the transfer of the asset which is rupees 20,000 or more, otherwise through an account pay check or bank draft or through an electronic clearing system. So if you borrow or you receive in connection with the transfer of a property either by way of advance or in any other manner, whether the transfer of the property takes place or not. So to this extent, the legislature said that if you are receiving any money of rupees 20,000 or more, otherwise then by an account pay check or bank draft, then there is penalty of the corresponding amount. And similarly, if you are making or if you are repaying the amount of rupees 20,000 or more, otherwise then through an account pay check or bank draft, then there is also penalty of an equal amount. So the objective is to dissuade and discourage the cash transactions. Now the last, there is one provision which has been brought since last 3-4 years now, which says that if you receive a sum of rupees 2 lakhs or more in aggregate from a person in a day, in respect of a single transaction or in respect of the transactions involving one event or occasion from a person. So if you are receiving rupees 2 lakhs in aggregate from a person in a day or in respect of a transaction which is single in nature, so you cannot be heard saying that you received rupees 2 lakhs from any of your clients in cash. No, that is prohibited, and it is prohibited to this extent. It is on revenue account, it is on capital account, whatever. So the restriction, no person shall receive a sum of rupees 2 lakhs or more in aggregate from a person in a day in respect of a single transaction, in respect of the transactions involving one event or occasion from a person, otherwise by way of an account pay check or bank draft or through electronic clearing system. And if there is a violation, then there is a penalty of an equal amount. So we can avoid these pitfalls. We have to file our returns of income in time, as there are penalty provisions. Then we have to comply with, in case that we have deducted, then there are time limits within which we have to deposit the taxes which we have deducted in time. Then we have to file the return also in time. And I mean, these are the things, and I think the 40 minutes are over, and then I must hand over the baton to T.N. Singla ji. Thank you from the core of my heart for having very patient ears to me. Thank you.
Gupta ji, after hearing you,
Yes.
we found that income tax is not all the taxing. It appears to be very easy, though we know that once the returns have to be filed, we will again have to back up on you. And even otherwise, that becomes a good occasion for us to meet our chartered accountant friends and brothers. I will just ask Mr. Singla to take over. Ask. Yes, sir.
Yes, सिंगला साहब को अनम्यूट तो करो आप.
I'm trying that.
Hello.
Haan
Are
ji,
you
sir.
now?
Yes, sir. Yes. Haan ji, Singla sir.
Good evening to everybody, every participant, and thanks to the organizers of Beyond Law CLC. So Gupta ji, I would like to make certain correction in your deliberation with your permission.
Yes, definitely, because I do
Under-
not
under-
get this level of
Under section 40A3, now cash payment for any
10,000.
cannot be paid more than 10,000.
10,000. Yes.
And now even for the capital asset, no payment can be made more than 10,000. Earlier capital asset was allowed.
No,
Second-
it can be made, but depreciation will not be allowed. That's all. Yes.
Yes.
So
Otherwise,
there is
otherwise we are not claiming this as expense. No, we are
yes,
claiming
yes.
depreciation.
Yes.
So whatever you claim, that can be only disallowed.
Yes.
Secondly, 269 SS, receipt of loan or advance against property, now it has been reduced to 10,000.
Okay,
So,
that may be.
10,000
Maybe I may be remembering the old, because I mean I do not practice at that level.
Similarly, we cannot repay more than 10,000 for any advance or
yes. That's very
property
nice.
or
That's very nice.
This
Very
is
nice.
the few things I wanted to tell. So now coming to the certain obligations of the professionals. If, as Gupta ji has told, if the accounts of any professional is, or rather professional, any individual is audited in the last preceding year, then certain obligations for TDS during the current year are there on the professional. So those are 194C. If any contract is made, then you are to deduct TDS. If any payment is made to the professional exceeding 30,000, then you are to make the deduction. If any rent is paid exceeding rupees 2,40,000 during the year, then you are to make the deduction. Then similarly, 194(1)(a), this is for applicable for everybody, because if you purchase any property exceeding more than 50 lakhs, then you are to deduct 1% TDS on that. Then coming to the one new section, that is, if you are making any payment of rent for 50,000, exceeding 50,000 per month, this is for the individuals and for the HUF. This is 194(1)(b). New section is introduced. If you are paying rent more than 50,000 per month to any person, even for residential house or for any property, then you are to deduct TDS at the rate of 5%. This is very, then if you are making any payment to any NRI, which is taxable in India, on that you are to deduct tax with the certain rates, but those are prescribed. Now coming to the recent amendment, one is, earlier we used to file the return, those who are not having tax audit up to 31st July, those who are required to tax audit up to 30th September. Now the date has been extended up to 31st October, but with the rider that you are to submit the tax audit report on or before 30th September. So आपको report you are to submit, and it cannot be delayed because it is to be submitted online. So 30th September तक आपको you are to submit the tax audit report, but return you can submit up to 31st of October. This is the recent change. Then there is condition that if there is a penalty provision if you don't file the return within the due date, then 5,000 is the penalty. But if you delay it later than 31st of December, then it is 10,000. However, if your income is less than 5 lakhs, then it is 1,000 rupees only. But penalty is there. Earlier penalty was not there. Secondly, if there is any error, the time for revision of the return is reduced. within the same assessment year, you can revise it. Earlier, it was allowed for another assessment year after the completion of the assessment year. So now, rest all things are explained by them, but what I want to say one thing, one is deeming provision in under section 50C, wherein they say that whatever is the stamp duty rate, that would be deemed to be your consideration when you sell it, any property, whether it is for capital gain or what. Here, the department has now provided one cushion that any value exceeding 10% of the stamp duty value would be treated genuine. मतलब 10% तक अगर आपने suppose it is 10% difference is to be ignored up to 10%. So earlier the people were feeling difficulties in this because stamp duty valuation and actual consideration was normally different. So 10% concession is allowed. So now coming to the aggregation clubbing part, the clubbing is there if the payment is made to any spouse, but if the spouse is professionally qualified and providing any services as professional, then you can pay amount according to the market price. So this is one of the exception which is there. Now coming to the saving part, we can save something, some amount to save the taxes. So this is one is ATC. ATC, you all know it is up to 1,50,000. It is allowed. But in this, there are 2-3 things which I want to tell you. Like if you purchase any house and any stamp duty is paid during the year on the purchase of the house, provided you have taken loan for that house, so wo aapko stamp duty is also covered under in this 1,50,000. Similarly, tuition fee paid for the children, up to 2 children, tuition fee paid is also included. Any repayment of housing loan, that is also included in this. So up to 1.5 lakh, 1,50,000, you can claim the deduction. This is a good deduction. Then coming to the 80D. The government is very much conscious about the health of the citizens. So they have provided that if you go for the Mediclaim insurance, then 25,000 per person it is allowed. If you are senior citizen, then it is allowed up to 50,000. If you are providing medical policy for buying medical policy for the parents, if the parents are senior citizen, then it is 50,000. It is allowed. So this is also good deduction, and you never know whenever this type of policy is come to your help. In this policy, this amount, even the health checkup up to 5,000 is also included. So you can have health checkup also, but for except health checkup, all other payments are to be made other than cash. For health checkup of 5,000, you can make the payment in cash. Then there are 80DD, which is medical expenditure on disabled person, any dependent on you. If you incur any disability, they have explained in the Act, 75,000 per year is allowed. If the disability is severe, then it is 1,25,000 which is allowed. Then another is 80DDB. For the medical treatment of the person himself, dependent, then up to 40,000 per year it is allowed. Disabilities, they have explained for which treatments you can go for this. And if you are senior citizen having age more than 60 years, then it can be up to 1 lakh per year. Then there is one section newly introduced last year, 80EEB. In this, if you buy any electric vehicle, then interest on loan up to 1,50,000 is allowed. Then 80E is there. 80E is there if you take education loan for any of your child or your dependent for the higher education, then any interest paid on that within 8 years from the year when you start paying the interest, is allowed as a rebate subject to no limit. Then there is one section 80EEA. This is very important section. Last year they have brought it. If the value of the stamp duty value of the property you purchased is less than, not more than 45 lakhs, and you have taken loan for that house, provided you don't have any other property, then you can claim 1,50,000 interest extra other than the 2 lakh allowed under section 24. So this is extra allowed 80 EEA. Then friends, 80G, this is you can make the donation, and at the same time for the making the donation you can get the tax benefit. 10% of your gross total income you can give as donation. Certain funds like Prime Minister Relief Fund, Chief Minister Relief Fund, certain funds are notified by the government wherein 100% exemption is allowed, and certain other charitable institutions and societies and funds are notified by the government where you get 50% of the donation. But no such rebate would be, deduction would be allowed if you pay any donation exceeding rupees 2,000 in cash. So any donation exceeding 2,000 is to be made by any other mode than cash. Then 80GG, this is if you are working somewhere outside the station due to your posting or due to some business obligation and you are paying rent there, provided in that city your spouse or minor child should not have any house in that city, then certain deduction is there. This is lowest of the, they have provided 3 benchmarks, or lowest of that is allowed 5,000 per month, 25% of total income, excess of actual rent paid over 10% of your total income. So whatever is the lowest, that is allowed as expenditure. Then friends, 80GGC, contribution to political party or electoral trust is exempt if the payment is made by any mode other than cash. So this is also allowed. Then 80TTA, it is interest on saving bank account with any bank, cooperative bank or post office up to 10,000 it is allowed. 80TTB, in the case of senior citizen, it is allowed up to 50,000 of the interest. This is on even on FD also. FD, RD, saving on all interest earned from the bank, post office or cooperative bank. So these are the few deductions. Then another is 80U for the disabled person. If the person is, any person is disabled, he can get deduction up to 75,000. If the disability is severe, then it is 1,25,000. These are the few deductions which you should take into mind when you file your return, prepare your return. Then friends, another is, I suggest that professionals are normally not paying any advance taxes. Friends, you are paying 12% interest on that. Income tax department would charge if you don't pay advance tax, but 12% interest. So it is advisable if you have a taxable income or you expect that your income would be taxable, then pay advance tax according to the guidelines provided by the department. Then best 80C is the one section which is giving large benefits to the any taxpayer. One is you save the money, you earn the interest, then you save the tax also. In this, best investments are PPF, maximum higher rate, tax interest earned on PPF is also exempt. ULIP, then you can go for the FDR for more than 5 years or more. You can invest in the equity oriented mutual funds and wherever, and you can buy the NSE. So in a way, this is the best you can avail the benefit. Friends, now one other provision is there. They have provided that either you take the rebates or deductions or you pay the lesser rate of tax. Friend, this is not available to the professionals or business. We cannot change every year. Otherwise, other persons can change every year. They can opt any, whether they can go for the lesser rate or they can opt for the deductions. But for professionals, once you adopt, then you have to continue with that. So with this, because जी मेरे ख्याल time पूरा हो रहा है, आप
there couldn't be a perfect precision. Spot on. You took 20 minutes exactly by the watch. It shows why you are so successful. What you commit, you perform, and that is why people come to you for the purposes of filing filing of the returns. So we are taking the questions. Anuj Kohli asks, can an advocate claim deduction for anything paid as a referral amount in a cash to any individual?
That is 48(3), more than 10,000, you cannot pay any amount which you claim as expenditure. Up to 10,000, yes.
Then Manik Makkar says, there is this myth that maintaining a law firm is much costly and involves so much formality, like maintaining books, separate ITRs for firms and partners, requirement of audits. Kindly burst this myth. Help young lawyers like us to have a vision to get a firm in our own name one day, whether it is advisable or not.
Vikaji, you leave aside the tax benefit or tax problems. Partnership has its own advantages and disadvantages. So partnership, when we go for the partnership, we don't see this, there would be tax problem or this. Partnership is normally executed partnership deed for seeing the other benefits and your convenience and benefits. So this is only one thing is to be done extra, that you are to file the return of partnership firm. Otherwise, every individual is to submit the return, whether he is partner or not. So this is not much problem. It can be easily solved. And we professionals are there for this type of services. But partnership is normally, this is my experience, is entered into for seeing the other benefits.
So another question of the offshoot itself, because large number of friends we quite often discuss. Let's assume he's a partner of the firm. So his return will be filed in the name of partner, and what about his other incomes? Let's assume rental or any other expenses which he's earning beyond the partnership firm. So whether he has to file one return for that, or how he will do it?
No, as I explained, the partnership firm would submit the return separately, and every individual would submit his or her return separately. And in that, he is to disclose every income. Even your share from the partnership is exempt. No double taxation is there, because that is already taxed in the hands of the firm. Only salary or interest received from the partnership firm is taxable in the hands of the individual. So whatever he has received as salary or interest, plus any income, whether income from house property, whether interest, whether if he's drawing salary from somewhere else, everything, that is to be one return. Every person is to file one return, and that is to include each and every income taxable.
Thank you. So Deep Goyal asks, whether sale of rural agricultural land is an agricultural income within the meaning of agricultural income under section 21A of the Income Tax Act.
21A hai wo.
21A, I stand corrected. 21A.
The agriculture income, the Act has defined, they have defined that any agricultural land situated outside within the municipal limit, no doubt it is not agricultural land, because that is treated as urban land. If it is outside the municipal limit, then they have fixed the limits. Up to 10,000 of the population of the nearest municipality or board, no municipal limit is that is exempt. More than 10,000 to 1 lakh, 2 kilometer distance. More than 1 kilometer, 1 lakh of population, it is 6 kilometer. More than 1 lakh to more than 10 lakh of population, it is 8 kilometer distance. So if this falls within this distance, it is now, earlier it was road distance, now it is crow flight distance. So it is, if it is within that limit, then it is treated as urban land. It is not. Otherwise, if it is outside that, then if you sell it, everything is exempt. But in the case of urban land also, if you sell it and within 2 years you purchase another agricultural land, then it is exempt.
Next question is, if the invoice is more than 2 lakhs, can we take cash till rupees 1,99,000 or rupees or not? Not one client got gift from his father in many time in a year. He will make a gift.
They have said that the act says in a one day you cannot receive more than 2 lakh, or for one transaction. So transaction should be less than not more than 2 lakh, or single day you should not receive more 2 lakh or more. So this is the condition.
Since one of the participant had questioned on the partnership, etc., some friends have just pitched in whether it is advisable to go for LLP or a law firm itself.
It's very difficult to say. LLP, it has its own advantages. Partnership has own. LLP is having more safeguards, but at the same time, certain more formalities are to be done. So it is up to the professional who is opting for any such scheme. But because LLP is taxed as a company, as a firm only, and the company is taxed separately. Partnership firm and LLP are taxed similar in a similar way. Tax purposes, there is no difference.
I think we don't have any other question, and it was a wonderful session on behalf of both of you, Mr. Singla and Mr. Gupta. Words cannot express our gratitude. The questions which were hovering in our mind as to what could be the solution in such like situation, though at least I have a person like you filing my returns, for me it is not that troublesome. But large number of people have got benefited from the inputs given by Mr. Gupta and Mr. Singla. There couldn't have been a better session done by both of you. The gray areas which were within our mind going around, what should be the best way? You have just dispelled those clouds hovering in our mind. As a formal vote of thanks, I call upon a dear friend of mine and a elder brother, Mr. Sachdeva, to express his formal vote of thanks to the entire session.
Thank you, Vikas, for giving me this opportunity to address vote of thanks to the two most learned people in this field. So far as Mr. Singla goes, I think my connection is for the last more than 35 years to him, and I have learned from him. In fact, I would be candid enough to admit it. Singla sir, thank you very much for coming onto this platform and guiding us all along with Gupta ji to a subject which is alien to all of us, and we all advocates. We are very strong in all other fields, but when it comes to the personal income tax, we all dread fear. And today is an occasion when you have dispelled so much of the myths in our minds. You have informed us with so much of the clarity as to how to be compliance observants, so that we do not end up on the wrong side of the law. We do not end up paying the penalties. How can we claim various exemptions while filing our income tax returns, while making our expenditures, and while also making our earnings, while making our investments for our properties or for our housing. And there could not have been more elaborate in such a short time, such a complete module in such a comprehensive manner, which has benefited not only people who are present over here, but this session will go across the board on all the social media platforms, and it will help many professionals. From our heart, on behalf of Beyond Law and on my personal behalf, I convey our sincere gratitude to both of you to spare out time in this difficult times. and guide us all. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Sir, sorry to bother. 2 questions were left out. I'm just reminded of cricket. A person has been declared out, and subsequently by review system, he's called back. So I'm asking both these speakers just to hold on, and the other participants to hold on. Mr. IP Singh just pitched in another message to me that you have forgotten my message. My apologies to my elder brother. If an income of an advocate is around 20 lakhs, whether he is required to maintain accounts?
No. If you want to opt for the Section 44 ADEA deemed income scheme, then you can opt for 50% of that income. You declare 50% of 20 lakhs and then file the return. No need to maintain the books. Less than up to 50 lakhs, you can file the return by declaring 50% of your income, and no need to maintain the books of accounts.
So another question, it's a short question by Mr. Abhay, again a dear friend of ours. Is law firm liable to pay GST?
GST is actually different subject. I am not dealing with it, but GST, in the GST, most of the liability is as a reverse charge on the person paying the fee. So it is not basically on the advocates. The reverse charge is on the person who pay the fee.
Now I've been unmuted.
I stand corrected. It is the rare occasion when the speaker is muted. And apologies.
Sir, there is one query which has come: whether the sale of rural agricultural land is treated as agricultural income. So, as Singla Sahab told, that rural agricultural income, if there is a gain, that in any case is exempt. But then this question is more relevant in case of sale of or the transfer of urban agricultural land, whether on the face of it, this question may look to be very strange, but it has got substance, because section 2 subsection 1 capital A says rent or revenue derived from agricultural land. So this question arose in quite good number of cases, and though the amendment has been brought in 1989 with retrospective effect from 1/4/1962, and yet this question is still there. This is quite hyper technical question, whether rent or revenue would include only the usufruct or even the sale proceeds of the urban agricultural land, because the amendment which has been made under section 2(1) capital A, now one explanation has been added. If we read that explanation, that shows as if urban agricultural land sale proceeds now comes within the meaning of rent or revenue derived from agricultural land. But then there are judicial division on this point, and therefore it calls for a very long drawn process of debate in itself. And but then there is substance in this question.
Gupta ji, I can understand why the Gupta jis are very popular. You have given all the Gupta Gyan for all this, how to unlock these things. Sir, and Gurmeet Sethi has asked, suppose I have 4 properties on my name and out of 3 premises on rent, at what rate income from other sources be calculated?
This is not income from other sources. This will be income from house property. Now the rental income of all the 3 properties now will be calculated by taking the gross rent which has been received. Then we will have to deduct the taxes which have been paid in respect of the taxes paid to municipal authorities. Then we will have to claim deduction equal to 30% of the rental as a statutory deduction. If there are interest in relation to the borrowed funds which have been used for the purpose of acquisition, construction, repair or renovation of these properties, then even that interest will be deducted out of this rental income. And then whatever income would come, that will become part of your other income, and then by aggregating this income under with other incomes under the different heads, then it will be seen as to under which tax slabs you fall. So this is the methodology for working out computing income from house property.
Vikas ji, I will take just 1 minute's question.
There's only one. Mr. Shok Singla has pinpointed one asker. Once he sees there is a combination of speaker who is a chartered accountant and one is an advocate, he's taking cue from the fact that there are 2 speakers. He posts the question whether advocate and CA can form a partnership firm or not.
Yes. In fact, chartered accountants regulations do not permit the formation of this partnership, and therefore, as of now, it is not permissible. I am not aware about the Advocates Act or some
it does not.
regulations under the Advocates Act, but so far as chartered accountants regulations are concerned, Singla Saab would vouch for it that it is not as of now permissible under the law.
Sir Deva Sahib, you wanted to ask a question.
Yes. Singla Saab, Gupta ji, just one question for our personal benefit. Many of the times, our clients who are companies or who are otherwise firms, they deduct the TDS at the time of making the payment, but by the end of the financial year, they fail to deposit, even till the time the tax is to be deposited or the returns are to be filed. What should an advocate do in such circumstances? One, he has lost the money on account of the TDS, though he can claim from it, but that client has already gone. What is your advice?
Now, Gupta ji, should I?
हाँ बताइए Singla.
Now there is a separate column in the income tax return wherein you can mention that the income is received in the next year and TDS has been deducted this year, and you would claim the TDS in the next year. So that column is there, and then it is allowed in the income tax.
No, I say that TDS is not deposited at all by that client.
So in that case, Singla Saab, if you permit me, there are recently judicial decisions coming from High Court, and the first decision on this point, which I remember, is with the name of Om Prakash in 242 ITR by Guwahati High Court. Now, which says that if the person who has deducted has not deposited it with the government treasury, then the remedy of the tax department lies against that person. The credit of this amount, now credit of this amount to this person against whose payment this has been deducted and cannot be denied.
Okay.
In fact, there is section 198 and 199, though under the Income Tax Act, says that the credit of the TDS will be given if it is paid by the deductor. But there are judicial decisions, series of judicial decisions which of late have come from the High Court, which say that the remedy of the tax department lies against the persons who has deducted but not deposited, and not against the persons out of whose income this amount has been deducted but not paid. So, I mean, those decisions, Singla Saab or I can forward it to you, and you can make advantage.
Please, it will be obliged, sir.
But then if you bring it to the notice of the tax department, even the tax department will pursue and chase that deductor who has not deposited, because it is considered as, in a sense, that misappropriation of that amount, having retained the amount from you. So, amanat mein khayanat wala jo situation
Yes,
hai,
yes.
Government
That's a criminal offense, that's fine.
वो तो गवर्नमेंट की अमानत रख रखी है उन्होंने.
And thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the clarity.
Thank you, sir. It is just like, as I earlier said, that after the vote of thanks, it was just like a player being declared out. He goes to the pavilion, comes back, and plays a wonderful inning, and we have a wonderful match. Thank you to both of us, both of you, and all the participants. Tomorrow we stay connected. We have a wonderful session on the latest topic, the land acquisition, the compensation and rehabilitation. What is the way ahead? All those who want to join our sessions, like us on the Facebook, Instagram, as well as join the WhatsApp group. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Gupta ji, and thank you, Singla Saab.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Singla Saab. Thank you, Gupta ji.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you.